Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good evening. You're with me, Mazlina Ismail. Alhamdulillah. In this program, Man and Nature. Alhamdulillah. In this 14th, or I should say it's a final episode for Man and Nature, where it has come to its final episode for season 2022. And after weeks of sharing on various topics concerning our nature and bringing the experts, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Sheikh Muhammad Saifuddin bin Sheikh Muhammad Saleh as our guest again today. And Dr. Sheikh, once again, is a Principal Fellow cum Director at Centre for Science and Environment Studies at IKIM. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Sheikh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back in the studio, actually.
As a guest, yeah, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. So, the title for this week's discussion is Small Act, Big Impact. What is the underlying message that we'd like to share in this final week of Man and Nature, inshallah?
Right. Thank you, Haja Mazlina. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we have been given the opportunity to meet again on the air in Man and Nature. And as Haja Mazlina mentioned, this is our last episode for this year's season.
That's right.
How time flies.
Yeah.
We started, I think, in April, in the month of Ramadan, and now we are into the first week of July, and we are wrapping up our discussions that we've had for the past 14 weeks, including this week, so that everybody who has been following us know what the underlying message is, what the underlying theme is when it comes to the discussion in Man and Nature. So I think for me personally, I believe the underlying theme, which is actually repeated in almost all episodes of Man and Nature, is a simple one, and that is we have the responsibility to look after the natural world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And we have to remember that we are a part of the natural world that Allah has created. This, of course, is our responsibility as mankind. It's part and parcel of our amanah that we carry as Khalifah of Allah on this planet. And the important point here is that as human beings, as Khalifah, we cannot ignore this huge responsibility. Each and every one of us actually has a role to play in carrying out the responsibility of ensuring that the world is looked after. No matter how small or how insignificant that we may feel our roles may be, in actuality they are all important, because what we want is to ensure that the outcome is impactful. What we do may seem to be small, but we hope that what we do, if we do it collectively, it can be very impactful and can bring about the much needed change that we want. So if we choose not to do anything, then this would affect the outcome of tackling any issues pertaining to the environment and the natural world. So I think this is the message that we try to put across to our listeners as a reminder to create awareness and to encourage each and every one of us to take whatever necessary action that we can.
Yes.
We cannot say that this is not our responsibility, this is somebody else's job, but what we have to inculcate within ourselves is that each one of us has a role to play, no matter how small it may be, but if it is an accumulated effort, then I'm pretty positive that the impact will be something that we want to happen.
Yes, for as long as you are part of this earth,
Yes.
living on this earth, you are responsible to have a share on taking care of this nature. So inshallah, when we started this season's Man and Nature, it was during the month of Ramadan, if you recall.
Yes.
And we devoted all episode during that month, discussing on what we can do to make this year's Ramadan a better one, a green Ramadan, if you recall. So what was your motivation to touch on this issue?
I think the motivation for me is quite straightforward. Ramadan is the most blessed month, the most holiest of month for Muslims. And Ramadan, as I said, I think in one of the episodes, is like a rare flower that blossoms once a year. And just as we begin to smell its fragrance, it disappears for another year. We can agree for a fact that when we go through Ramadan, it's actually like a school, a madrasah. And during this madrasah of Ramadan, we actually learn a lot when it comes to attaining taqwa or God consciousness. Many Muslims take stock of material possessions, reflecting on what is really needed and how our consumption patterns affect the world around us. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam emphasized his followers, that is ourselves, that the act of giving up food and drink loses its significance without personal evaluation or muhasabah. Now, essentially, Muslims are encouraged to reflect on this question. What is the point of the physical act of fasting if our actions and words go unchanged? Now, while there are many higher values that Muslims strive to adhere to in our daily lives, the values of environmental consciousness and also stewardship are particularly relevant during the month of Ramadan.
Right.
In the month of Ramadan, that is the right time for us to encourage ourselves and those around us to be the best of people, or khairul ummah. To be the best possible stewards or Khalifa of the earth, and to live as individuals who are compassionate as well as respectful towards the diverse and beautiful aspects of Allah's creations.
Right.
As human beings, we are responsible for the world around us, and we have a duty to strive to make the changes we wish to see. Again, going back to our title, small act, big impact.
Yeah.
If all of us are able to take stock of our personal connection with nature and our consumption patterns, surely the world would be a different and a much better place. If we continue to take stock of this, inshallah, we will be able to continuously observe the lessons of Ramadan even after Ramadan ends. Now we are in the month of Zulhijjah, another holy month. I think, what we've learned in Ramadan should be carried out even until today and even in the coming months,
Right.
until we meet Ramadan again, inshallah.
Inshallah. Well, like we said during the month of Ramadan, where your spiritual, your actions, your surroundings should reflect your spiritual cleansing of the month. Remember?
Yes.
So inshallah, we hope that it still continue until today.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. One message has become an underlying theme of the program. Is that of the relationship between man and nature. Would you like to elaborate as to why this is something that we have to give attention to?
Well, I think if you think about it, as Muslims, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. So what this means is that Allah does not only create mankind.
Yes.
There are so many other creatures in the world, whether they are animals, plants, or even microorganisms. Some can be seen with our naked eye. Some can only be seen using special equipment. Now, there are many more creations of Allah that we do not know of. This is where science comes in. This is where we do our observations, trying to unravel the mysteries of nature. Now, for me, this is a sign of the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's right.
Now, all the creations that Allah has created are beautiful, and what better way for us to give thanks to Allah for this than by ensuring that these creatures are looked after. Now, regarding the issue of looking after the well-being of all the creatures of Allah, I think we discussed this with our guests in some of the episodes of Man and Nature. If you recall, we spoke about working with microbes.
Right.
We acknowledged that microbes or microorganisms are unique creatures which cannot be seen with the naked eye. Yet, there are special creatures of Allah which have important roles in nature. Some are beneficial to humans, while others may pose certain risks. So we need to be aware of how to manage our relationship between us as humans with these microorganisms in order to ensure that we will reap the benefits from these creatures, while at the same time making sure that no harm is caused to our lives as well as causing destruction to the environment. Now, equally important when we discussed about ethics of animal research, we looked at how best to use animals by minimizing any harm to them, especially when research is conducted. Again, like all things in the world, animals are creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, I repeat, we have this responsibility as Khalifa to ensure that they are looked after so that no harm comes to them. In essence, looking after the relationship between man and nature is critical in guaranteeing that the delicate natural balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created is looked after. If this balance is disturbed, that not only that puts risk on the natural world and the environment, but also it has, I would say, an impact on our own very survival.
Right.
So I think that's why we need to look after our relationship with the natural world.
Yeah.
This is something that we cannot ignore. And again, as you said, we are part of the world. We are not living exclusively outside the natural world. So this is our responsibility that we should, carry out and implement.
True. And besides, everything is created with a purpose, no?
Exactly.
Speaking of survival, Dr. Shah, it is clear from the very first episode that the underlying theme of Man and Nature has been about the importance of sustainability. Why is this message important, you think?
Yes, if we our listeners have been following from the very first episode of this season, I think the word sustainability comes out many times.
That's right.
I would say almost in every episode of Man and Nature.
Right.
We touched on this when we discussed about nature-based energy from biomass. We spoke about sustainability when we talk about solar energy. We also spoke about sustainability last week, when we touched on biodiversity conservation in the palm oil industry.
Right.
Not only that, we also looked at how sustainability can be implemented in our society, so that it is not just a catchphrase, but also it is something that we can implement. So that's why we invited guests to speak about, for example, sustainable practices that can be implemented at our mosques. And we also shared how communities can play an important role in sustaining heritage conservation.
Yeah.
So all these topics were brought in for discussion in Man and Nature to open our eyes to the fact that, again, as Khalifah, we have the role in ensuring that whatever that we do is towards sustainability. One lesson that we learn from these discussions is that when it comes to sustainability, each of us has a role to play, regardless of our background.
Yeah.
We don't need to be scientists. We don't need to be policymakers. We don't need to be leaders. Even as a lay person, even as a member of the community, we have a role to play.
That's right.
What we do may be looked at as small, or maybe some people may consider it as insignificant. But at the end of the day, our small acts, when accumulated, actually contribute towards an impactful result. When we do things individually, and we gather all these efforts in our community,
That's right.
definitely that will leave an impactful impression, and hopefully this will contribute towards ensuring that sustainability is achieved, and we can actually look after the future for our children and grandchildren.
Right. Besides, we need to start somewhere when it comes to
Exactly.
culture. So it should start from our own self, and then to the family.
True.
Goes on to society, and so on and so forth.
I think what is also important is for us to remember that we don't need to have something big
Yeah.
to do. Let's start small.
Yes.
Something that is practical, pragmatic, something that is doable and achievable.
Yeah.
If we are too ambitious, at the end of the day, what I'm worried is that the plans will just remain on paper.
That's right.
No one wants to implement it, or no one can actually have the ability to implement it. Let's start small. Like you said,
Consistent is the key.
consistency is important, and as you said correctly, let's start with ourselves and our family.
Right, inshallah. So now, at the final episode, what are the take-home points from this season of Man and Nature?
Okay,
Share.
basically there are so many take-home points that I can share, but
We
I
have
like,
time.
well, I like to highlight 5.
Okay, inshallah.
if I may.
Sure.
Okay, number 1, I think we need to ensure that the natural balance between man and the environment is well looked after in order to preserve as well as conserve the natural world that Allah has created. This is part and parcel of the responsibility that we carry out as Khalifah of Allah on this world.
Yeah.
This is one point that I think we've been driving through as a message throughout our discussions. Number 2, this is basically what you just said earlier. Each of us has a role to play in practicing sustainability. We start with ourselves and our family, and then let's cascade it into our neighborhood, our local community, our workplace, our educational institutions, and hopefully this is something that can snowball into something bigger that is done at the national and hopefully at the international levels as well. But, as you said, let's start with ourselves. Point number 3,
Yeah.
if we attain the level of taqwa or God consciousness, we talk about this quite a lot during the month of Ramadan, we would not actually partake in any acts that cause fasad or destruction on the planet. Instead, we would uphold our amanah or trust given to us to manage the planet in a proper manner according to Islamic teaching. If we have taqwa, we will always be aware, or we will always feel that Allah is always watching us. If we know that Allah is always watching us, we will not do things that Allah does not allow us to do.
Yes.
Now, point number 4, as Muslims, we try to observe the adab and also akhlaq as taught by Islam. Adab and akhlaq are not just about how we treat other people, but also how we treat other creatures of Allah in the natural world. So I think when it comes to adab, let's not forget that we also have the responsibility to ensure that we treat animals, plants, or whatever that is in the natural world, living or non-living, in the best possible manner. And finally, point number 5 that I would like to iterate here is that ukhuwah or brotherhood is an important ingredient when we tackle environmental issues. And equally, it is also important in Islam. In terms of our role as Khalifah, we need to understand that in order for us to tackle the environmental problems, we should be united. We can do things individually, but as we said earlier, if this can be done collectively, then there can be meaningful changes.
Yes.
We have to work as a jama'ah in order to make lasting impact.
Right.
Individually, our actions may be small, but if we do it collectively as a jama'ah, then there will be a lasting impact that we hope to achieve, inshallah.
Inshallah. So that's a lot of take-home points that we should ponder and start action, actually, as we have always encouraged people to start somewhere, start small, but most importantly, as we say, do it consistently. So inshallah we will see the impact, like you said, although small act but big impact, and hopefully lasting, and also if you've done it collectively, it'll be something big that we can share for the future generations to follow, inshallah. So I guess that's all about it, that we have come to the final episode of Man and Nature. Inshallah, we'll have the next season to see you, to share more on Man and Nature.
Inshallah. Perhaps, if I may, I'd just like to add one short point. I like what you said about istiqamah. I think, the point of having this program, Man and Nature, is actually to highlight certain issues that are of importance. And of course, to be fair, it's impossible for us to cover everything when it comes to our relationship with the natural world.
That's right.
But, whatever that was discussed throughout the 14 weeks of Man and Nature this year, hopefully, at the very least, it could create awareness and trigger a call for action on our part. Now, this is something that I hope that every one of our listeners can understand. When we bring certain topics, it is meant as a way for us to create understanding on the issue, what role that we can play, and how best we can tackle whatever environmental problems that may occur in around us. And again, it goes back to the point that we cannot just be mere observers. We have to do something.
Yes.
Each of us has a role to play. So if we can remember this point, then I think we can be a person who can contribute towards the betterment of the environment. I think, Hajjah Masina, if at the end of the day, we have to understand that we are accountable for our actions or inactions.
Yes.
So in the day of judgment, we are accountable.
Yes.
And if we do something, we are accountable. If we don't do anything, we are also accountable.
Yes.
So we have to remember that. Perhaps towards the end, if I like,
would you like to conclude? This whole.
I think my sincere hope is that our discussion has been beneficial, informative, and also enlightening.
Ameen, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I would like to apologize for any shortcomings in this program. And hopefully, as you said, inshallah, we hope to meet again next year in 2023 in a new season with more topics of interest, and perhaps I hope to bring also more guests so that they can share their experience and knowledge for our benefit, inshallah.
Inshallah, I'm sure there's a lot more of topics that we haven't actually discovered or haven't discussed. So inshallah in the next Man and Nature, so you have to wait until the next season. We'll let you know when, and inshallah until then we appreciate your time, your knowledge shared all this in this 13 episode.
It has been my pleasure.
Alhamdulillah, likewise. So thank you very much, Dr. Shah, once again, until we meet again, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum